Hello and welcome to another Vista tips and tricks video. This is going to be a continuation of our Busking with Vista series. In the last video we looked at busking with presets. I showed you how to store different types of presets in a few different ways. We then put those presets into a layout and I showed you how to recall that layout using a snapshot. And lastly we looked at things like live time and how we can use live time in conjunction with our presets to create some really nice transitions live on stage. In this video, we're going to continue on with our busking series and look at effects, but more to the point, how do we control our effects? So that will involve triggering our effects. Once they're running, how do we change them, so the speed and the size? How do we change effects nice and quickly? And then how do we stop our effects once we're finished with them? So there are many ways to play back effects in Vista. A lot of people like to use effects templates or even extracts to play back effects stored within them. Now this is a completely viable way of doing it, but does have some drawbacks. Now the things I see people running into most often are not necessarily the starting of effects, it's the changing of them and then stopping of them. Now effects templates, you can get effects going very quickly, simply select some fixtures and then trigger the effect. But because it's all going into your live programmer, if you then want to maybe just stop the position or stop the color of a certain fixture type, you then have to grab that, find the effect, stop it, or change it for a new one. And this is quite an intensive process. And if you're trying to busk a band on the fly, that's a lot of button pushes to be doing whilst trying to keep track of what's going on stage. So to solve these kinds of problems, I like to put my effects into queue lists. And I'll tell you why. Queue lists have basically the inherent properties that you need to control your effects. To play an effect, you play the queue. To change the effect, you go to another queue. To stop an effect, you release the list. So you already have your start, change and stop built right in to your queue list. Another really good reason to use queue lists is they're a really good organizational tool. Now, the method I'm going to show you, I like to use effects that are done by type, by fixture. So what I mean by that, I like to have a separate queue list for my spot intensity effects, then my spot position effects, then my spot beam effects, and so on. And then I'll do the same for my wash intensity effects, my wash position effects, and my wash beam effects. Now, the great thing about doing that is if I ever want to edit things or update things, I know exactly where they are straight away. I simply open up the list that I want, go to the queue and edit it. Now the last thing that makes queue lists really, really useful is the fact that if you're using kind of more complex blocking and repeats in your effects, you don't have to remember the fixture order. If you're doing that with effects templates, to get the right repeats and the right blocking, you have to remember the way you selected your fixtures or the group that you used when creating that effect. If you put it into a queue, all of that is remembered for you in the queue. So when you hit go on that queue, the look that you saved will be the look that you played back. So it basically gives you that security of when the beat drops and you go to this look, it's exactly the thing that you want. It takes all the worry out of hopefully this effect will look okay, or I hope I got the right fixture selection and then played this template. So now I'm going to show you how to create a layout similar to your presets to trigger all of your effects. And the reason we're going to do that is for workflow. Because our preset layout is done in such a way that it's very easy for us to see everything that's in front of us. These are all of our options for all of our fixtures. We simply select a fixture group, change the color, change the zoom, etc. We kind of want a similar workflow for our effects. And that's because if we're going to use one part of our desk in a certain way, we want to use all of our console in a certain way. And that's good for muscle memory, especially when things are happening on the fly. You don't really want to be thinking about where things are. You just want to be able to hit a button or tap the screen and that thing to happen straight away. So we're going to start with building our intensity effects for our spots. And we're going to put them all in one queue list. And it's going to be put down here in our master effects list quick picker. We're going to right click, go to create new cue list, and we're going to call it spot intensity master cue list. Then we're going to hit OK, right click, and go to edit. And then I'm going to go back to my home screen so we can start programming. Now, before we get on programming, we need to just sort out some of our cue list properties. So we're going to go to cue properties, and I want to make sure that all of my cues are default time 0, because we're not going to be using cue time for any of these. We're going to be using manual fader time. So to do this, set it to 0 seconds, then go to defaults, save as show defaults, and OK. Then we're going to go to our cue list properties. Here, all we need to change is fader type, make sure it's intensity only, fader autoplay to set to just autoplay, and fader intensity mode to submaster. Also, put exclude from store on, so we don't accidentally store this into anything later down the line. And if we go to timing, I like to have a release timing of 1 second for my intensity effects. Then hit OK. Now we're ready to start building our lists. So the first cue in our intensity lists will be that group of fixtures at full. So this is our spots. So we're going to take our spots to full. Now I'm going to go into live, go to my presets, and then just bring them down stage. This is so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. Now the reason I went into live is if we go into our timeline, you can see the position is held in live, but in our cue stack, only intensity is here. And because we only want intensity effects to be in this cue stack, we don't want any other programming in. So if you want to move your lights around or change color while you're building your effects, do that in live, and then go to your cue list to record stuff. So I'm going to label this spot on, and then I'm only going to create a few cues for time's sake, but obviously these effects lists can be as long as you like. So I'm going to put maybe 3 cues in each, just to give you kind of a flavor of what's going on. So we're going to go to our effects engine. We're going to hit new cue, and this is going to be our first effects cue. Now, a few things are going to be done all at the same time here. So we're going to select our fixtures. We're then going to go to new effect. We're going to go to intensity and hit OK. First thing we're going to do is create an effects master. Now, to do this, go to rate, go to no master, go to new master, and then call this one intensity master. I've already made one, so I'm simply going to select it. Then on your console, if you go to your effects master's quick picker, you can then drag and drop your effects master wherever you want it. Now this is useful to have while you're building your effect, because you can see kind of how it's going to react at different speeds. Another thing to do with effects masters is whether you want it to be per cycle or per fixture. Now per cycle means for every tap of my BPM, I get 1 cycle of the effect. If I hit per fixture, it will be every tap of my BPM, I'll get 1 step of my effect going to the next fixture. So depending on what kind of effect you want to play back, this is something you can consider. I will be going into detail on more effects generator type things in another video. In this video, I'm just putting these in as kind of placeholders. Please do not think that these are the types of effects that you necessarily need to use or the order that they're going in. Effects are kind of a personal preference, so please fill all of your cue lists up with effects that you want. Just going to change this to overlap of 75, make it a little bit better. And I'm going to slow my effects master down a bit. There we go. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to call it left to right. Then going to create a new cue, stop that effect, and simply create another one. So we'll create another intensity effect. Maybe we'll make kind of a snappy kind of thing. There we go. Remember to add your intensity. I'm going to make this per fixture because I want this to basically snap on every tap of my BPM. And I'll call it in/out. Then I'll do one more for the sake of time. Stop that effect, select my fixtures, new effect. I'll make kind of a ripply effect. So go to sawtooth, select backwards, make it 75 again. There we go, select random. Actually, let's make it size 80. There we go, and then intensity master. So I have like a ripply dimmer effect there. So I'm going to call it ripple. Okay, so obviously you're probably going to want to put more effects in. So literally just keep adding cues and keep adding effects to them. So every cue will have one effect in it. Label it, get it to exactly how you want it, attach it to a Speedmaster, and you're kind of ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is skip back to start on that. Go back to my effects lists layout. And from here, what we can start to do is build the triggers for this list. So up here is where I want all of my triggers for my intensity effects. So I'm going to right click in this quick picker and go create new cue list. I'm going to label this one the first effect in my list. So not the spot on, but the first effect. So Q2 is what this will be triggering, and that's left to right, so LTR. Hit OK. Now we're going to right click this and go to edit. I'm also going to go into my timeline. The reason I'm doing this is because we're going to use some insert commands, and I like to do this in my timeline so I can see how they're going in. So we're going to hold down our control key or our yellow modifier key, go to insert command, go to jump, select our intensity master list for our spots, select Q2, the one we want to trigger, and then hit insert. Then we want to go to release, and we want to release this cue list. And the reason is, this is just going to be a button. Do not think of this as a cue list anymore. This is going to, we're going to press this, it's going to fire that cue, and then it's going to release itself, because we don't need it hanging around playing back in our console. Once we've hit it, we just need it to go away again. So we're going to release it. So essentially, once we've pressed this, it's going to release itself. Then I'm going to close that. I'm just going to drag the release time kind of 0.2 away to make sure that the jump happens first and then the release afterwards. Now to test this works, simply click on your cue list. As you can see, it's released itself, so we can now get rid of that. Hit save, and it's jumped us to our effect. Now all we need to do is make a trigger for all the other cues in our list, and it's actually quite quick and simple. All we need to do now is if we change this to our all, we can now right click, go to duplicate. All duplicated lists end up in your all quick picker. And from here, we can hold down our green modifier key or our alt key and drag that to where we need it. Then right click, go to edit. And now we've already got these commands in. So all we need to do is edit these commands. And you can right click, go to edit command. You see jump is already going to the right target list. So we just need to go to Q3, OK, right click, edit command, release itself. OK. We can then close this and test it. Perfect. So now we can jump between our first effect cue and our second effects cue. Now what we can do is if we click our cue, Control C to copy the label, rename it, Control V, we've now got them labeled as we need them. Now we just rinse and repeat. So we'll duplicate that list, right click, edit, right click the command, go to Q4, right click the release, go to the next one down and release itself, close it, drag it to where we need it to be, test it, then Control C and Control V to relabel it. So there are our three effects that we've got. So what about our spot on? So with intensity effects, I like to have two ways of stopping my intensity effects. I like to stop them completely, so my lights go out, and I like to stop them so they remain on. So we're going to do that now. So to do that, we're going to right click in our kind of kill effects quick picker, create a new cue list, call this kill spot on, or whatever you like to label it. Right click it, go to edit, and for this we're going to put in an insert command that will jump to our first cue in that list and then release itself. And same again, we're just going to drop that back there. Close and save that, and then test it. So this will stop your effect, but keep your lights on. And then all we're going to do is duplicate this, drag it over, edit it. We're going to change this jump command to a release command. And instead of going to the first cue, we're simply going to release that master list. And then we're going to release itself. And test it. Right click, rename it to kill spot off. And that's the basics of this setup. Save and get rid of that. So we have our master list down here. This list has all of our created effects in it. All of these aren't really cue lists anymore. They're simply buttons that fire commands. So now I can bounce around all of my effects. And remember, these lists can be as big or small as you want, so that you can carry on. And at any point, I can just stop it to on, or I can stop it to off. So just like our presets page, we've just given ourselves a load of options on one page, so we can control all of our effects from here. We can start them all, we can change them all, and we can stop them all in a very nice and easy way. It does involve a little bit of setup, but as you can see, by simply duplicating your lists and editing your commands, it's quite quick and simple. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to then basically copy that list to another fixture type to save even more time using extracts. So first thing we're going to do is right click down here, and we're going to create ourselves another master list. But this time it's going to be for our wash intensity effects. So we'll call this one wash intensity effects master cue list. And as you can probably see a pattern emerging here, it's basically rinse and repeating for every fixture type with every effects type. And then by the time you've finished, you'll have filled up this grid with all of the triggers and all of the ways to stop them. So we're going to right click on this, go to edit like we did before, go to our home screen, and now we're ready to copy using an extract all of those effects from our first list into this one. I'm going to show you how to do that now. So we're going to open our spot effects master list. We're going to select all of our spot fixtures. We're going to hold down red or shift and select all of the cues within this. So we have the fixtures that were used in the cues and the cues themselves. We're then going to go to components, go to intensity in our extracts quick picker, and create a new one by holding down Control or yellow and tapping in it. We're now going to call this intensity effects. Make sure intensity is selected here and hit OK. Now we can close our spot master list because we don't need it anymore. Now in our wash master list, all we're going to do is select our washes, and with one cue in here already, we're going to just tap our intensity effects, extract, and select merge. And as you can see, instantly it has built our list for us. And not only that, we have all of the effects that we recorded for our spots transferred to our washes. And even more than that, they're all listening to the same effects master too. So this is a really, really time-saving feature. It's extremely powerful. You can basically take any data from any group of fixtures and then suck it out of one cue list and build a completely new cue list with a new fixture type instantly. The only thing you have to do is obviously go through, make sure your fixture selection is okay, and make sure your grouping is okay. Because if you're going to more or less fixtures, there's going to be some few tweaks you're going to have to make to get everything to work. But the fact that you've got your Q list built for you and all the effects are roughly there means that you don't have to sit there and build these lists over and over again. And also, another bonus to this is all of your lists will kind of be consistent. All of your lists will kind of have the same effects in there, so your rig will be using all of them kind of in unison. So all we have to do now is label these up. So I'll call this wash on, and then left to right, in and out, and ripple. And then we just do what we did before. We go to our effects lists, and we simply create the triggers we need for these. And because we've already got 3 triggers here ready, we can duplicate these and go from there. So to do that, I'm going to open up my all quick picker again, because everything we duplicate will end up here. So select all 3 of these this time. Right click, hit duplicate, and then drag these up using green modify key or alt to where they need to be. Obviously, like I said, if your Q list has 10 Qs in it or 20 Qs in it, this will do all of this for you, and you can just copy all of those triggers and have 20 triggers ready to go. All we have to do is edit those commands in those triggers, but that's simply a case of right-clicking, going to edit, being in your timeline, and now right-clicking jump, edit command, and instead of it going to our spot master list, we want it to go to our wash master list. And then we want it to start from our first effect, which is left to right, hit OK, and the same for the release. We want to release itself, so we just want to release QList 8 here, hit OK. Now we can close that and test it out by tapping it, and there we go. Now you can just rename this simply by getting rid of the copy of. Now obviously, if you want to have these a little bit more defined, you can put wash or spot before the name of all of these, or arrange them in a different way so you can clearly see that they are grouped differently. For me, I just like having them basically the same as my presets, just laid out one after the other, all in rows of the same type. But again, this is all customizable, so you kind of just make it your own. So for the second one, again, we're going to go to edit, right click, edit command, select the wash master list, in and out, hit OK, release, copy of in and out, OK. Close that, and then there we go. Tested it, rename it, get rid of the copy of, hit OK, and then the last one, right click, edit command, go to our jump to wash, ripple, OK, and then edit command, release itself, and then test it. Cool, close that, rename it, hit OK. Now all we have to do is the same that we did for these. So I'm simply going to duplicate another one of these, drag it over here, edit it. So now it jumps to wash on, hit OK, and releases itself. And then we're going to rename this one to kill, wash, on. Hit OK. Then we tap this. It kills our wash master effects to on, and then duplicate that. Edit it. Change this to release, so it's releasing the wash master effects list, and change this to release itself. Tap it to test. Get rid of that. Rename it to kill wash off. As you can see, we're starting to build up a bit of a pattern here. So we have our effects for our spots, our effects for our washes, all easily activated and changed at any time, and very easily stopped to on or stopped to off. Next part of this is simply putting those lists onto faders. Now, because they're intensity lists, I like to have control of how bright or how dim my effect is. So if we go to our Q lists, go to our master effects lists. Again, this is another reason we do this is because everything is easier to find because it kind of goes in its own box, if you like. We'll put spots on this fader here, put washes on this fader here. We'll put flashes on the flash keys. You really only need a flash key and an intensity fader because all of the triggering, all of the goes and the stops are done by these buttons here. So this is also another way of giving you even more space on your console because you don't need to have go buttons, go back buttons, jump buttons attached to any of these lists because all of this is doing it for you. So you only really need a fader and a flash key. And the nice thing about this is if I release everything in the desk, because I made these both auto play, as soon as I nudge this fader, it'll activate these lists. So it doesn't matter. I don't have to remember to hit play on these. All I have to do is move that list or flash it and it'll activate. Another nice thing is, so I've got my spots on here, drag my fader to 0. I can then change the effect underneath that fader and it's still playing. So I can literally just bring that effect in, take it down, change it, bring it back in again. And it's all connected to this BPM master here. So very easily changed. And then this wash is also on that BPM master as well. So however fast this is going, or however slow it's going, a nice easy way to just sync up all of your effects. And then once again, if I want to stop any of this, I can stop it. So the next part is going to be position effects. Color effects and beam effects interact very much the same way as you would an intensity effect. So you'd simply create a master color effects list for every fixture and then just fill it full of color effects that you like and then create the triggers for them, the same as you have with the intensity. The only one that is a little bit different is position. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to create position effects lists and the extra little bit that you need to put into it, because what we're also going to be doing is using a no base point effect for everything. So we can now use our position presets to provide base points for all of our position effects, essentially meaning once you have a position effect running, you can then move it anywhere on stage you want using your position presets, essentially creating even more versatility within your busking rig.